So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan again, and today I'm going to be doing front brakes on my 2001 Ford F250 4-wheel drive. This truck does not come with the little metal tabs that start squealing when you're getting close, so I did lose rotors, so we're going to be doing rotors and pads on this. I'm also going to give you some key information and some helpful hints on making this easier to do with basic tools. Alright, so let's get to it. Alright guys, so one of the easiest ways to tell whether you might need brake pads or not is to check the fluid in your master cylinder. And the reason for that is, alright, if your fluid's getting low, okay, and obviously you don't have any leaks, that means you probably are getting pretty close to having worn out pads, alright? And the reason for that is your pads start out, let's say a pad starts out this thick, alright? Now it's down to this thick. Well, that means instead of the caliper having to travel this far, it's now having to travel this far, which takes more fluid, all right? So that's just an easy way to tell whether your pads might be getting low as long as you don't have any brake fluid leaks, all right? And obviously I should have kept a better eye on it, and I might not have lost my rotors right now, all right? So anyways, got the tire and wheel off. Now, it is easier. What I like to do is I turn the wheel a little bit to the right so I can get an impact on these two sets of bolts right here. Just makes it easier. So if you're doing one side at a time, you can fire the engine up, turn it to the left or right, and that gives you more clearance to get to your bolts here, being the caliper bolts and then your bracket bolts. All right, so I'm going to take those off. Doing this one-handed, guys, so be a little patient with me. Alright, so once you get those two bolts loose, if you come in here, right about there, you can pry against the lip of the rotor and collapse your caliper a little bit. Alright? And that frees you up so you can get the caliper off. I don't know if you saw that thing drop there. Alright. I usually just set it there on the leaf spring. Alright. Now you can pull these pads off. Alright, so now I'm going to pull the two bracketry bolts off here. Caliper bracket. Hold on first. Okay, and that pulls off. On a two-wheel drive of this year, you have to pull wheel bearings and stuff, but since it's a four-wheel drive, this rotor is just going to come right off. And then when you're in here, guys, if you got a four-wheel drive, these hubs, I really recommend changing them around 100,000 miles, all right? Because this will leave you stranded. These are a sealed hub. They are non-serviceable, all right? And that's a bad day if those go out on you on the road. So keep that in mind. All right, guys, so one of the things you need to do when you're doing brakes, or is highly recommended, I should say, I guess it's not a have to, but I wouldn't do brakes without doing it, is your caliper pins here. Okay, peel those off nice and slow. See how dry that is? So you want to get some grease, brake grease, all right? So lubricate your pins up. Make sure they're clean first. These ones were pretty clean. They were just dry, so. All right. Make sure your boot's not ripped or torn. Go ahead and slide that back in, and then if you just push in, usually they snap right on. You want to make sure that that accordion goes over there's a little recessed area on there that snaps onto, okay? Make sure it moves nice and free. See how that's going in and out nice and free? That is a must. If that's sticking in any way, you could have a caliper dragging. You're going to pull one way or the other, all right? So that's one of the criticals to this. The next big critical to this, okay, which is an absolute must. At the shop I work at, I've seen it happen 4 times, and I've been there for 20 years. People do not use red Loctite on these on the bracket bolts. And like I said, I've seen it happen 4 times that these caliper bolts have backed off. All right. And that's all it takes, just some red Loctite. I do not recommend doing brakes without putting these brackets back on with red Loctite. All right. What'll happen is it'll back off. It'll flip the caliper up, because once it backs off, depending on which one backs off, it can lock up the tire and wheel. All right. So this is an absolute must. Alright guys, so after you get the rotor on and you put red Loctite on your caliper bracket bolt, okay, and you grease your pins, you can go ahead and put your caliper on, bracket on. Again, red Loctite a must. I'm just using an impact, but just make sure you get these super tight. If you're using a ratchet, put a cheater bar on it. Okay. So you always want to replace these pieces as well, because they do get worn out as well. All right, and they just snap in. That's just pretty much pay attention to how the ones how they came out and put them back the same way. This one's still in. Let's show you. They just pop off of there. And pop right back in. Okay. Just like that. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put some caliper grease on our slides as well. Or this brake lubricant. You want to put it on where the discs slide. Don't get crazy with this, but you want a little bit on there. Just so everything's lubricated, everything can slide nice. Now we're going to go ahead and put our pads on. Okay. On this year truck, they are not directional. It's the exact same pad for all the way around. Okay. So just kind of push it in like that, and then straighten them out. They snap right in. Okay. Okay. Snap in like that. Now this is a little cheater thing you can use if you have one. Any type of a clamp will work. Because these Fords, you clamp that right towards the bottom. These Fords have these extra clips to help spread the pads apart once you release the brake. Okay. And that holds those nice and tight, because if not, these pads will sit there and spread on you and do all kinds of stuff that can get very annoying when you're trying to put the caliper on, okay? So that's sitting there like that. Now we have to collapse the caliper. So we're going to just bring it over. I'm going to set it up here. Alright. Now I usually use a C-clamp and an old pad to do this. However, since I had to go to work and I was not at the house, and for some reason I decided to throw away my old pads. So there's several ways to do this. You can use a pair of channel locks. Okay. Let's see if this one's going to go with the channel locks. And since I don't have the brake pad, that's right. Okay. I'm going to try and use this wooden block to do this. We'll see how it goes. Get up top here. Okay. So, yeah, they're sucking down. So, pair of channel locks. Collapse the caliper all the way. You can do it one at a time. Sometimes you have to kind of shimmy back and forth when you do it one at a time, because the other caliper will push out as you push in the other one. I'm going to go ahead and finish this off with the C-clamp just because it's kind of being hard. Or you can use a basic C-clamp here. You can do it with the channel locks if that's all you got. That's the reason I'm showing you that. You got a C-clamp. Just get centered. Use your pad that I don't have anymore. Obviously, I'm using the block of wood. And just collapse it down. Okay, all the way flush. And then back it off. Another thing, make sure your boots aren't ripped, because that can let dust in there, and that could cause a problem too with sticking brakes. So just something else to keep a lookout for. All right. The other thing when you're doing this, okay, because this is an easy thing to do, is make sure that you didn't twist your caliper line up when you're doing this. I've seen somebody do that as well. So notice how I've got the clamp down here. We're going to put the top bolt in first. And notice it's going right over there because of the fact that we have that clamp holding that. So now we're going to put the caliper bolts in. Red Loctite, a must. Thank you. Alright, so we get the top caliper bolt in. And usually, so you just want to make sure that the caliper is over most of the pad. Then you can take this one off because it really can't spread out on you. And it'll just slide right on over the other part of that. Alright? If you don't find some type of a device to hold those caliper, to hold the pads shut, these springs can be a real pain in the you-know-what. Alright, so you want to find something to hold those, trust me. Even a second set of hands while you're putting the top caliper in to bolt in to put it over top will really come in handy if you don't have a C-clamp or something, alright? We'll go ahead and put the bottom bolt in. Make sure that's slotted, so you have to make sure that's lined up correctly. Otherwise your bolt won't go in anyway, so if you're having a hard time getting the bolt in, it's usually because that's not lined up right. Alright. Now, an impact will break these bolts, so you have to be a little bit more careful with these. This is just me knowing my impact and knowing how far to go. Also, it has an automatic shut off when it starts impacting, so you can kind of judge it a lot better on this gun. So be careful tightening these bolts up. They're not quite as tough as your bracket bolts. Still, make sure you're getting them things nice and tight, because the same thing can happen. Okay. Alright, good and tight. So key things, make sure your brake line's not twisted when you put your caliper back on. Always use red Loctite on all 4 bolts. Use grease on your pins and on your slides where the pads ride. Alright? And when you have these extra springs on the pads, find something to hold those pads together on the bottom while you stick the top caliper bolt in. Trust me, it'll save you a lot of headache. Alright? Let me get the tires and wheels back on. Alright, so whenever you're installing lug nuts, if you haven't done it before, you want to make sure you go kind of across from each other when you tighten them down. Okay. And then I usually turn out and go around one more time. Just to make sure I didn't miss any. So when you get in, you slowly press and release the brake until you get pedal. Okay? You gotta fill those calipers up a little bit. Okay? So I got good pedal now. Alright? So I hope that helped you out, guys, and hope to see you on the next clip. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe. I'll have more to come. Have a good one.